Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So I'm gonna ask again, does anyone have any questions before we get started? What I do? Okay, I'm gonna take that as a no. And I
Quick question.
Oh, what was that?
Sorry. Just looking at this game, what would you say would be the average time you should spend completing it?
Okay, that's a good point to start off on then. So I would say I have no clue. I've done this game a number of times. It's a game one, so it's a relatively easy and quick game if you're in a more advanced place. But that's a good point to make is some of the games that look easy can be very hard. Some of the games that are hard can be very easy. So it's really hard to determine how long a game is going to take you. And that's why I hate when people are like, well, I just skipped through and, or I got to game 3 and it looked hard. Game 4 looked easier, so I just went to game 4. And that's not always the case because sometimes those games that look easy can be harder and the ones that are harder can be actually easier. So I really don't know how long this game would take us. I mean, it looks like a pretty simple ordering game, so I wouldn't expect it to take super long, but I can't really guess given what it's telling me right now.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have questions? Okay, we're gonna go into it then. So we have a detective is trying to determine the order in which a criminal recruited 7 accomplices. So we have P, Q, R, S, T, V, and W. That's quite a lot. And in addition to discovering that the suspect recruited the accomplices one at a time, the detectives have established the following. Okay, so we have to determine the order of when these accomplices were recruited. So it's a basic ordering game. There's nothing fancy going on with it. We're not duplicating any variables. We're not having some spots that are empty. We're not grouping anything. So this is about as basic as an ordering game can get. I'm gonna write my numbers across and my spaces because I really suck at spatial awareness. Okay. Does anyone have questions on like the setup? I mean, the setup's a pretty basic setup. This is what you're going to see in pretty much any ordering game.
I have one question. Since it's 7 accomplices, why you wrote out 8?
Because I didn't read it.
Oh.
It's been a long day at work.
No, I understand.
I think I was getting too far ahead of myself. Any other questions? Anyone notice any other mistakes I might have made? Did I do all the right variables? Sometimes I don't do the right variables. No, I did. Okay. All right, well then we're just gonna go into the rules. So what we're gonna do, how we're gonna attack this game is by making worlds. And we do that by eliminating our rules. And the way that we eliminate our rules is by creating different scenarios to never think about that rule again. So I'm actually going to, there's not really a good rule to like kind of exemplify that, but let's say the rule had said something like V is in 6 or 7. Rather than writing out V is in 6 or 7 or writing shorthand V 6 or 7 or something like that, I'm just going to create 2 diagrams where V is in 6 and V is in 7. I never have to worry about placing V again. I don't have to worry about violating that rule. And it's going to be a lot easier to trickle in the rest of the variables. So that's what we're going to be doing on all of our rules is we're going to look at the rule, we're going to see what it's saying, and then we're going to see, okay, where can those variables go on my diagram right now? And how does that affect the other rules? Does anyone have questions before we like jump into it? Does anyone have questions on like the theory behind it? Anything like that? I don't want to go too fast. Okay. So rule number 1 says S was recruited neither immediately before nor immediately after T. Does anyone have any inclination of how they would write that rule? Or anyone want to take a stab at it?
I I would write it's like S in a box, then T in front of it with a cross in front of it, then another box with S and then T behind it and cross it out.
Okay. So like something like this.
Yeah.
Cool. I should also add there's no, I mean, there's correct ways to diagram some things, but if the way you diagram something makes sense to you, that's all that really matters. So even though I've never seen someone diagram it like this before, I don't diagram it like this, it's still a correct way to diagram it and it still makes sense. And you're still doing it in a shorter way than writing out the rule. So perfectly good, perfectly fine. So as far as thinking about how to create worlds off of this, one of the easy ways to kind of think about it is pick a letter within your rule, see where it can go. So in this rule, we have two variables, right? We have T and we have S. They can't touch each other. They hate each other. They need to be separated. They're like children. So what I'm going to think about is, okay, if I'm looking at T, where can T go on my diagram right now?
T can go in the one position. It can go in the 2 position. Depending on if S came before it, it can go in 3. It can also be in 5, 6, or 7.
Yeah, pretty much any position, right?
Mm-hmm. Other
And,
than 4.
and same with S. S can, at this point, S can go in any position, so long as they don't touch each other. So basically, I could have something like this, or I could have something like this, or I could have something like this. Basically, what I'm trying to get across is there's a lot of possibilities for those variables. There's nothing that's super restrictive about it. I don't have to like block them in anywhere. I don't have to have anything before or after any of them at this point. So I am not going to create worlds off of this rule right now because it's creating way too many. If we sat down and we actually wrote out all the places that T can go, all the places that S could go, my God, we'd probably have about 30 or 40 worlds. And that is just not feasible. It's not doable in a time section. So what we're going to do is we're going to hang on to that rule for right now. And we're going to go into the next rule. And maybe it's a little bit more restrictive. Maybe we can tack on something like T has to be before V or something like that. So it's not giving me a restrictive area to put T and S, if that makes sense. So looking at my second rule, it says Q was recruited earlier than R. How are we writing that one out?
Q-R.
Perfect. I love to write these dashes in there. Some people will put like dots or something, but I like to write these dashes because I like to think of it like an accordion. I can stretch Q and R out as far as I want, or I could push them together where they're touching each other, so long as Q is before R. But they can go pretty much as far apart as they want or as close as they want. So again, let's think about where could we put Q? Where could we put R?
We can't put R first and we can't put Q last.
True, can't put Q or R first, can't put Q last. So looking at Q, where could Q go then?
Right now, Q can go 6 and Q can go first.
Could I, are you saying in between 6 and 1? Or like, could I put Q in 3?
Yes, it can go in 3 because it just has to be before R. So as long as it's before.
Yeah. So in between 1 and 6, I can put Q. What about R? Where could I put R?
2 through 7, basically.
Yeah. Again, creating a lot of worlds. It's a little bit more restrictive than 1 because we actually have places where variables can't go, but not very much more because we still have a wide variety. Even though I can put Q in number 2, I still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces that I could put R. I can move Q to 3. I still have 4 spaces I can put R. Same with R. If I put R down, I have 5 spaces that Q can go. So it's creating a lot of different places where I can create these or put these variables in. So not a good rule to kind of start with. My golden rule is if it's creating anything more than 4 worlds, especially at the beginning right now, I'm not going to mess around with it. It's going to be way too long, way too hectic. So we're going to hang on to rule 2. We're going to move down to rule 3 and see what rule 3 says. Rule 3 says V was recruited immediately before W. How are we writing that rule?
I would do V and then W in a box, just so you know it has to come right before it.
Yeah, perfect. I like to write those boxes in there because it means that I can't pull them apart. Nothing can intervene in between those two, whereas our Q and R, I can pull them apart as much as I want. So when it's telling me something is immediately before or directly before, box them in. Think of it like a concrete box. Nothing can penetrate that. So if I'm looking at where V and W can go, where could they go?
Pretty much between 1 and 3 and 5 and 7 as a combo.
Why can't I put it 4 and 5?
P is in 4.
Oh, I didn't get to that rule yet. That's fine. We'll just throw that in there because P and 4, I'm not going to write that rule out. I'm just going to slap it right in there. Okay, so I could, I'm trying to grab you. I could go in between 1 and 3, and I could go in between 5 and 7. So given all the other rules that aren't really giving me a whole lot to work with, I think this is a pretty good place to start, especially since now we've gone through all of the rules. We don't really have anything super restrictive. I think our V and W rule is the most restrictive at this point. Does anyone have questions before we continue?
Yes. I was going to say, would it be necessary, since we know V basically comes before W, can we say that, W can't go first and V can't go last, basically?
You could. You totally could. Honestly, though, when we're looking at where our variables can't go, it doesn't progress the game that much because it's telling me where variables can't go, and I'm more concerned about where variables could go. So if you notice where every time we go into a new rule, I'm constantly asking, where could this variable go? Where could this variable go? I'm not so concerned about R and Q can't go on 1 and 7. I'll write it down, but it doesn't really help me kind of figure out where R and Q can actually go. It just tells me where they can't go. And we're more concerned about placing our variables concrete. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just the way I've been practicing. That's why I just noticed it. So I was like, let me just ask.
It's a good way to kind of like start thinking about where your variables can go. Is thinking about where they can't go, especially when you notice like V has to come before W. There's no way W can go on 1. So if you can get your pen moving, if you're at this point, you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. If you can at least get your pen moving and writing down W not going in 1 can help you with that, I'm all for it. I just want you to think about it more progressively than thinking about, okay, where am I restricted? Where can it not go now? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Sweet. Okay, so let's take it chunk by chunk since basically our board is split with our V and W. So when it's 1 through 3, where could we put our V and W block?
You could put V under 1 and then W under 2.
Where else?
And then you could do V under 2 and W under 3.
Yeah, so we'll pause right there just to kind of talk about that. So basically what we're doing and what I recommend doing is when we have a block like this, a lot of people will go, okay, well, my block can go here. I can go 5 or 6 and then pick it up and move it over as if that 6th spot couldn't be a spot that our first variable can go in. When we're moving our blocks, we're shifting them down 1 by 1. So that's why it's able to go in 1 and 2, shift it down 2 and 3. And that's what we're going to do for 5 through 6 and 7. So what about when we're looking at 5, 6, and 7, where could our V and W go?
You could do V under 5 and then W under 6.
Where else?
And then V under 6 and W under under 7.
Yeah. Cool. Those are the only places that V and W can go. Once we've placed our P, it kind of splits our board, and now V and W can only go in those 4 places. This is the beauty of making worlds. I can erase this rule from my mind. There's no way I will ever violate that rule anymore because I have placed the only places where V and W can go, and I can't violate the rule anymore. So why keep it around? I have the luxury of erasing it physically. On the test, I would not recommend erasing it. It takes up a lot of time. I would just kind of not look at it anymore. So now we don't have to worry about that rule anymore. And as you can see, my board filled up pretty significantly. Now there's only 4 spaces that we're really working with, whereas before we were working with 7. So now our Q and R or our T and S rule are going to be a little bit easier to kind of fill in. So does anyone have a preference of which rule they want to start with? I think I'm gonna ask that question.
S or T?
Okay. Do you have a reason that you want to start with S or T, or is it just like it's the first rule?
It seems more restrictive than the Q and R.
Okay. How so?
Because it says Stanton was recruited neither immediately before nor immediately after, which makes it a little bit more like restrictive in my opinion than Peter just must be recruited fourth. I mean, not that one, the QR.
So honestly, both of these rules, I mean, both of these rules don't really help us a whole lot. Like it's Q and R might be a little bit more restrictive, but just by a little. If we're looking at rule 1, we can write it to be a different way. And I think it might help you kind of see how it's not as restrictive as Q and R, but like it doesn't change anything really. So if we know that S and T cannot touch each other, we don't care which one's first, which one's last, right? They just can't touch each other. We could write it out to say something like this. S and T are flip-flopping, and they can be stretched out as much as possible. I guess you could also put in there has to be at least one in between there. But looking at Q and R, I mean, thinking about where Q can go, there's only a number of places that Q could go. Thinking about where S could go, there's only a number of places that S could go. So sure, let's start with S and T. I really don't think there's like a more restrictive rule. So let's talk about S and T. Every time we go into a new rule, I should have said this too. Every time we go into a new rule, we have to look at all of our worlds independently. So if you look at 1 and 2, they're 2 different worlds. We still have the same variables placed, but they're 2 different worlds now because V and W are in 2 different places. So in order for those worlds to still exist, we have to make sure that they're following all the rest of our rules. So every time we go into a new rule, we're going to have to look at each world independently of each other. So if we're starting with world 1, I don't care which variable we're starting with, S or T, I don't really care. Where could one of those variables go?
You could do S or T under 3.
Sorry, I'm giving myself more space. Okay. And I like how you said S or T, because another way that we can shorthand this and not make as many worlds, because there's a lot of worlds where S and T can go, we can actually do something like this, S/T. And that way, that's going to tell us that we're going to put another S/T somewhere, and that's going to tell us that they can flip-flop. So whenever we pick S in one, we have to pick T in the other. So if one of my S and T's goes in 3, where could the other one go?
In 5.
Could go in 5. Where else could I put S and T?
In 6. Whoa, 5. I guess 7. Maybe 6 too.
Are you talking about when S or one of them is in 3?
Yeah.
So you're on the fence between 6 and 7. Is there any way that you can violate that rule? I don't really want to worry about the Q and R rule right now, if that's what you're kind of on the fence about. But is there any way that S and T could touch each other if you put it in 6 or 7?
Yeah, we would have to put it in 5 or 7. We couldn't do like 5 and then 6 or 6 and then 7 since they would touch.
Right. I'm gonna write that down. So when we're on like our right side of P, they have to be split up by one person. Totally right. But when S is in 3, there's still other places that our S and T can go because we've only talked about when it's in 5. Where else could it go?
If it's in 3, it could go in 6.
Could go in 6. Where else?
If it's in 3, it could go in 7.
Yeah. Basically, no matter what happens, if one of them is on the left
I think you
side.
meant T. You wrote V.
Oh, why did I write V? Oh, we do have a V variable. Maybe that's why. I don't know. But anytime one of them is going to be on the left side in this world of P, I can put that S and T anywhere on the other side at this point because it's never going to touch the other one. P's in between them. P's acting as their adult, their parent. Think of it like that. Does anyone have questions on that?
I do. So you're saying if S or T is in 3, we can have S or T in 5, 6, or 7.
Yeah, so I've split it up to where one's in 5, one's in 6, one's in 7. But really what you could also do is something shorthand like this. You can say it's between 5, 6, and 7 if you want. And then once we go into Q and R, you can manipulate that. I've split them up so you can actually see them in their positions.
Okay.
Any other questions before we move on? Awesome. We got to do that to 2, 3, and 4. So looking at 2, where could my S and T go?
Ask that again. I didn't hear it.
We're looking at the second world. So when we're looking at the second world, this one where V and W are in 2 and 3, where could my S and T go?
1.
And if one of them is going to be in 1, where could the other one be?
5.
6, or 7.
5, 6, and 7. Basically the same thing that we just did, right?
Yeah, you could shorthand it.
Yeah, for the sake of space, because if you've worked with me, you know that I really suck at spatial awareness. I'm going to write it shorthanded like this to tell me S and T can kind of go in between 5, 6, and 7. And then I'll edit that if I need to when we go into our Q and R rule. Where else could it go? I'm talking about V, W, P. There's one other place that we could put our S and T, and number 8 is going to be that blank world if you kind of need to have a blank world to look at.
5 and 7.
Yeah. If you haven't noticed by now, a lot of these games, once you kind of get down to the last few variables, have a pattern going with them. So we're kind of following a pattern right now. Okay. That's the second world. Any questions on the second world?
Yes, so for the second world, you're saying S and T could go in 1, and then it could either go in 5, 6, or 7.
Yeah. So rather than rewriting 2 additional or 3 additional worlds where S is in 5, S is in 6, S is in 7, I'm just going to shorthand it right now because we still have one more rule to think about. And sometimes when we look at that other rule, it actually will restrict where that variable could go. So it very well could be that maybe it ends up being that S and T have to go into 6 or something like that. So rather than creating those worlds, I'm just going to shorthand it for now.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense.
Sweet. Any other questions? Cool. Third world. Thinking about where S and T go. What could one possibility be where S and T are?
We go basically I would say 1 and 3.
Yeah. Because we have to split them up, right? They hate each other.
Mm-hmm.
Where else could they go?
Oh, 1, 3, and 7, basically, right?
Oh, sorry, I was trying to figure out what world this would be. 1, 3, and 7. Could one of them go in 2?
Yeah,
But if one of them is in 2, where does the other one have to go?
7.
Yeah. So basically what we're thinking about is, okay, let's look at it when they're on the right side, or sorry, the left side. Let's look at it when one of them is on the right side. So when one of them is on the right side, we know that it can go in 2, right? You just said that. Could it go in 1 and 3 as well?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is what I mean by we can kind of see a pattern forming here. Is it's basically a mirror of each other. P is down the middle and they're flipping each other. So they're kind of like a mirror image right now. Just kind of a cool thing to note at this point. Yeah, okay. Done with that one. And last one that we have to look at before we can move on to our last rule is number 4. Where could I put my S and T in my world number 4?
You could put it in 1 and 3.
Yeah. We can have them both on the same side. What is another place that we could do?
You could do 2 and 5.
Yeah. I'm gonna write it a little up here. Because also when we're doing 2 and 5, could we move that second spot around? Could we move it to 1? Could we move it to 3? Could we shift it around?
Yes.
Yeah, so basically we can either do they're all on the same side, split by one person, or one of them is split by P and the other one is free to do whatever it wants, basically. Anyone have questions on S and T? I feel like we kind of went through that a little fast. But that's our S and T rule. We have placed S and T relatively in every single board. These are the only places that S and T can go in. I don't have to worry about this rule anymore, which is really helpful for spatial reasons. So I can erase that rule, not have to think about it anymore. And now I'm just left with Q and R. Those are the only variables I have to worry about at this point, which is really nice. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of those worlds again, and we're going to figure out where Q and R can go. I would really recommend you do it like this, do it rule by rule rather than world by world. I'm sure a lot of people are like, well, in this first world, then Q is going to have to go in 6, R is going to have to go in 7. You're totally right. But I want to make sure that we eliminate the rules fully so then we're not missing out on some of the worlds. So try to restrain yourself a little bit. So if Q goes before R, let's look in the first world. I kind of already said it, so I'm just going to write it down. But the only 2 spots that we have left are 6 and 7, which means Q is going to have to go in 6, R is going to have to go in 7. Any questions about that? All right. And then we're going to look at number 2, world number 2. if we're thinking about where Q and R could go, where could we put Q and R? Or if it's easier to think about, pick a letter within our Q and R, tell me where Q or tell me where R could go.
Q and R can't be in the 7th spot. Well, no, Q can't be in the 7th spot.
Yeah.
So it can either be Q in 5, or Q could also go in 6, then R in 7, or it could be Q in 5, and then R in 7 with S and or T in the middle. It could be a number, like maybe 3 different ways.
So P. Okay, so let's focus on Q because you're going down the right path, and actually there's not a whole lot of different ways it could go. So with Q, you said it can't go at 7. That means it can either go 5 or 6, right? So I'm gonna make a world, one where Q is on 5 and one where Q is on 6. Leave my S and T over here. Q on 6. Now we're gonna look at both of those worlds and go, okay, where can R go? So in my second world, if it has to come after Q, where does R have to go?
R has to go in 7. Or R, yeah. Am I right? Yeah, R has is no must be on this one because R could be in 6 or 7.
Right. So you're looking at number 11 as well. So you said R could go in 6 or 7. But when
Right.
Q is in 6, R is forced to go in 7.
Oh, I didn't see. Sorry.
You basically said the same thing or the right thing. And then that's going to force in that second world our S and T to fit in that 5th spot. And in our 11th world, S and T are going to flip-flop with R. So wherever R goes, the other space is where whatever variable we pick between S and T. And that's a done world. Anyone need clarification on that? I felt like that kind of sounded confusing. Okay. World number 3, where can Q and R go?
2 and 7.
Yep, they're forced to go there. What about 4?
2 and 5.
I like this point, but they just kind of fall in. Okay, now we got to deal with number 9, which S and T can go between 1 and 3. So if we know that S and T can go between 1 and 3, and we're thinking about where Q and R can go between one of those variables, Q and R, tell me where one of them has or could go.
It's gonna look just like the 11th world. You have to make a new world.
Yeah, so we'd have to make a new world. Why do we have to make a new world?
Because there's more options for S and T to go in the 1, 2, and 3 spot.
Yeah, because different things happen. The other reason why we're making a new world is Q has to come before R. So Q can't go in 3 because R has to come behind it, right? So Q can either go in 1 or Q can go in 2. And when we put those variables down, things happen in those worlds individually. So when we look at the 9th world, variables are forced to go into certain places. But when we look at our 12th world, those variables are in different places and aren't forced to go into any place. That's why we're splitting them, because 2 different things are happening: forced variables, non-forced variables. And then R is going to flip-flop between S and T over in 12. Any questions on that? Okay. Let's go into world number 5. Where can Q and R go?
I'm wondering, is that 5 under there? Oh, okay, I see it. So that's just 5 and 7.
Yeah, my 5 kind of looks like an S.
Wait, I do have a question.
Yes.
Is that, so under the fourth world, is that a different world under it?
9. Yeah,
Oh,
I think I erased my circle. I'm gonna make that look like a 5. That's about as good as it'll get.
okay, perfect.
Any other questions? Okay. Number 6, where can Q and R go?
And 6, it can only go in 3 and 6.
Yep, they fall into place there. What about 7?
5 and 6.
Beautiful. Number 8?
1 and 6.
And last world that we're kind of have to deal with is number 10. Where could either my Q or where could my R go?
You're gonna have to make more worlds.
Yeah, because we have different places that they can go in, creating different outcomes, right? P,
Correct.
T, not B, B, and W. So where could one of my Qs go?
You can put it in the 1 spot.
Where could the other Q go?
You mean the R?
No, I meant like the Q. If
Oh.
it's not in 1, where else could it go?
It can go in 2.
Yeah. We're just gonna erase that. Okay. When Q's in 2, where does R go?
3.
Which means my last S or T is gonna go in 1. And when Q is in 1, where could my R go?
In 2 or 3.
Yeah, what's it flipping with?
S and T.
Yeah. Done. Don't have to worry about that rule anymore. And in this game, pretty much all of our variables are placed. That's not always the case, but in this case, it's kind of nice. It'll be easy for us to kind of go through the questions then. Does anyone have questions about the setup, going through the rules, eliminating them? Any questions on that?
Hi, I don't necessarily have a question about that.
Yes.
My question is, we're supposed to have like 5 to 7 per whole game set, and this is such a process to come up with like 14 worlds and then have to answer all their questions. I'm assuming that we do it, the more we do games, the quicker we'll become. Or is this typically what we will be doing, like setting up all these worlds to answer questions?
So I say on average, there's about 5 to 8 diagrams per game. That's not always the case for all the games. And in fact, ordering games usually can have the most diagrams because there's so many different possibilities. But on average, you're averaging between like 5 to 8 different worlds. This is a process. I did break them up further than I would probably have done if I was doing the game. So a lot of it is going to come from shorthanding your rules and where your variables can go. So like you saw with my S and T, I shorthanded that. Man, if we didn't shorthand that, we would have had an additional 6, 7 worlds. And that's just a lot. And you can shorthand stuff like this. This is kind of supposed to be a beginner's class. So I'm trying to break it up to get the point across of what it would look like. If you start to get to the point where you're like, I don't need to break it up, or you're at your point where you're like, this is getting ridiculous, you can start shorthanding stuff. But I recommend students when they first start to break it up all the way, so then you can kind of visually see it. Because what's going to happen is we're going to go into the questions, and it's great that you can shorthand your diagrams, but if you can't read them, or you're forgetting that S could go in 1 and you can move those variables around, then it's not much help that you're shorthanding it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Anyone else have questions? Okay. We're gonna go into the questions then. Oh, this is gonna be fun. Okay. This is going to suck. Okay, I think what's going to happen is I'm going to try to get the questions on here, but it's really difficult when we have a whole screen of worlds. Come on. For our first question, though, we don't really need our diagrams because our first question is a list question. This is what you're going to see on pretty much every single game, as the first question is a list question. It's asking you what the possible combination could be. Rather than going through your 13 different worlds and trying to match up the ones that, or the one that is correct, go through your rules, eliminate the answer choices that are violating your rules, and you're going to come up with your answer choice a lot quicker. So I'm going to give you guys about a minute or so to kind of go through the rules, eliminate the ones that are violating them, and coming up with an answer choice. All right, who's got an answer that they like or answers that they are stuck between?
I like D.
We like D.
Yep,
Does
I agree.
anyone, okay. Does anyone hate D or like a different variable or different letter answer choice? D is our correct answer. All the other ones are violating rules, and we can't have violations in our world. So this is our correct answer choice. I am going to, well, one thing, I'm going to try to squeeze our stuff on here. But one of the things that you can do to make sure that you're doing the right diagrams. Why don't I have, oh, there we go. To make sure that you've got at least one correct diagram is go through your worlds and see if you have answer choice D. I'm going to try to move some stuff around here. What is that? That's going to be T. Okay. Oh, this is, did not think about this. You. that right there. I'm gonna move this. Shrink you. Yeah. Not my best, but it will have to do. So this is Q. That's gonna have T, T, T. Okay. Hopefully that can help a little bit. Put some color. Ugh. This is gonna be a kind of hard to squish them all, but we'll make it work. Okay, so if we're looking to make sure that this one is a correct one, we're looking to see if we can have that diagram in the worlds that we have built. So I'm looking for V, W, S, Q, T, R. I can have that in my fifth world. If I had my pen. My fifth world right here. I have V, W, S, P, Q, R, Q, T, R. So I do in fact have our correct answer choice as a world, which is good. Yay. Okay. We're gonna go into our next question. Give you guys a little bit to try this one. And then we'll go over it together. Does anyone have an answer choice they like or that they're
C.
stuck between? What do we like?
C.
We like C. Anyone else like C?
I
I
like
do.
D.
Was that C all around? I think that was C all around.
No, I think somebody said they like D.
I thought, okay. I wasn't sure if I heard a D or not.
D.
What was that? we'll just go through all of them. Okay, so we like C. We're gonna go through all of them and see why the wrong answers are wrong. So we're looking for our middle 5 accomplices. So we're looking from the 2nd to the 6th. So it's very important to remember that we're putting our blinders on for 1 and 7, basically. We're not looking at that. What's really nice in here that they do is they kind of give us a consistency between 2 and 3. So what we can do is we can look at A and B kind of together, because we can look for the worlds where we have Q and S in 2 and 3. Where could that happen that we have Q and S in 2 and 3?
The 3rd world, the 4th world. Let's see. I think that's it.
Yeah, you're right. That's all. So if we have Q and S in 2 and 3, we have to have P 4th, which we have P as 4 here. Totally good. But in order for us to pick either A or B, we have to have T after that. And in both those worlds, doesn't happen. We don't have T over there. So in this case, we can eliminate A and B pretty easily. And we can do the same thing for C through E, because they all have V and W. And quite honestly, we can also easily cross out E because it's violating our rule of P has to be 4th, 2, 3, 4. I don't even have P in there. So we can eliminate E. But with C and D, we have to look for the ones where V and W are in 2 and 3. Where does that happen?
In the 2nd world, the 8th world, and the 11th world.
Yeah, sorry, I was thinking P and W for some reason. Okay, so yeah, those are the only places where V and W could be in 2 or 3. Now, what's going to come after it is either going to be Q or S or R or S. Where can we, looking at those 3 worlds, which one would our answer choice have to be? Well, it would either be this one doesn't happen. This one doesn't happen, flips them actually, but this one does. This one could happen. We could have Q and R there together. Why did I say Q and R? Not Q and R. Am I losing it?
The R and S could be because on 11 it could flip.
Oh my gosh, you're totally right. I was like, I'm losing it. Yes, we could have S here, we could have R here, we could have T here. So C is our answer. Any questions?
No.
Okay, good. Erase. Okay, we're gonna go into our next one. Our next one says if T was recruited 2nd, which one of the following could be true? So this is giving me an if question. So we're looking for the places where T could be 2nd. That's the only diagrams that we can use to answer this question. So in this case, where could we have T be 2nd?
In the 13th world.
Or 12.
Yeah. We have T, R, T, R, and that leaves us with S here and S here. So now we're looking for something that could be true. Go ahead and try to give it a go. Does anyone have an answer choice that they like?
D.
I heard that. I heard both 2Ds. I heard 2Ds. Anyone have one that they hate or that they're stuck between? Because D is our correct answer. When we talk about could be true questions, it just has to happen one time in our world. It could be true. It's a possibility. So because it could happen in my 13th world, that's enough to make it my correct answer choice. And we have reached our time. So if you want to stick around, I'll stick around and do the final questions, but feel free to go as well. I know it's time, so that's okay as well. We're going to go into our next question. Next question says, if Q was recruited immediately before R, then S cannot have been recruited. So we're looking for the diagrams where it's only where Q is immediately before R. Where can that happen?
The first world, the second world,
11.
Mm-hmm.
the seventh world,
Mm-hmm.
the ninth, the
Mm-hmm.
10th, and I guess technically 12 and 13.
Yeah. So even though we can flip R with our S and T, whichever one we choose, we can still flip it to force it to be that Q is immediately before R. Technically, this flip right here is two different worlds smushed into one. So we still have to think about the possibility that R could go immediately after Q. So that's why we can still use that 2nd and 13th, or sorry, 12th and 13th world. So now we're looking for something that S cannot have been recruited. Easy way to go through this is in our worlds, let's just go through them. Where could S have been recruited? And we'll cross them off. So in our first world, where could S be recruited?
In the third or fifth spot.
So we can eliminate C and D. What about my second world? Where can S be recruited?
In the first or fifth spot.
So we can eliminate A now. What about my 9th world? Where can S be recruited?
First or seventh spot.
Which leaves me with B. I don't have to go through all of my worlds to figure out this answer choice, and that's totally fine. If I can do something like this, I'm going to take the shorthand or the shortcut way of doing it. Any questions about that rule or question? Okay. Next rule, or sorry, question. Oh, if W was recruited earlier than R, and if R was recruited earlier than T, which one of the following could be true? So we basically think about these if questions as like new rules. So if we have W earlier than R and R is before T, we're going to narrow down our answer choices to these diagrams that have this happening. So in our diagrams, where could we have this chain happen?
The seventh world. And then the eighth world.
Mm-hmm.
The 11th world.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it.
There's one more world. What if we looked at number 6? We have W R, and we could have T after it. So we can still follow that chain in our sixth world. And I think that's it. WR, WW. Okay, yeah. Those are the only 4 worlds that we can use to answer this question. So now we're looking for something that could be true. So what could be true according to this question? Let's see. A. Yeah, because we have that happening right here. Q could be our first variable in there. And just as I said earlier, because it's happening one time, that's all I need to guarantee it being my correct answer choice. It's a could be true, not a must be true. Any questions about that question? Okay. Is this our last one? Okay, yeah. Last one. If W was recruited immediately before Q, which one of the following must be recruited sixth? So where do we have W immediately before Q?
6.
Is there anywhere else? I don't see anywhere else. So which one has to be recruited sixth?
R, which is B.
Easy question. Yeah, if we had multiple worlds that we were looking at it, because it was a must be true, it would have to be true in all of those worlds. So if there was another world that we were looking at, in order for B to still be correct in that other world, that other hypothetical world, R would still have to be in that sixth spot in order for it to be true. So that's the difference between the must be trues and the could be trues. Could be trues just have to happen once. It's pretty loosey goosey. Must be true is extreme. It has to happen in all of the worlds. So it's a very important thing to remember because you're always going to have a must be true or a could be true in your section. Does anyone have questions on the game, the setup, the questions, anything like that? Okay. I'm going to take that as a no. All right. Well, that was today. Thank you for staying overtime. I do these classes every Wednesday at this time, so you can sign up for next week. I'm going to start looking at April and planning out April, so then we can get some April dates set up. And then on Saturdays at the same time, I also do a circle slash class that costs $25. And that's where we go over my in and out method, which in my opinion is super easy, makes the game super quick, and are a lot of fun in my opinion. So those are my 2 classes. And then of course I do one-on-one tutoring as well. So if you want to sign up for a consultation, you can do so or message me. But other than that, that's it.
And you said just Saturday class you cover in and out, right? Because that's like literally the like every game I do good on, but that's the one I have difficulty with grasping right now.
Yeah. So Saturday we do in and out games. So that's where you have 2 groups, either A or B, in or out. That's what we cover on Saturdays.
Okay. What time is that class?
5 p.m. Central Time. So same time that this class is set up.
Okay, so
Whatever
that's
that
6
is in your
Eastern.
time zone.
Yeah, that's 6 for me. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, any other questions? All right. Well, I'm gonna go enjoy this really nice weather that we have. So hopefully you guys do the same or chill out or study. But hopefully I
Thanks,
see you guys
Rachel.
next week. Bye.
Bye.
Have a
Thanks.
great night.